Exploring deep cave solo gone wrong. This is the result of going head-on against nature. Today we will focus on 3 terrifying cave stories that went horribly wrong. The second story is really different. It will leave you surprised. Unlike the other 2, which emphasize the dangers of facing nature alone, this one is about a terrible scenario that we have never discussed. Now let us get started. The Chassahowitzka River in Florida is a popular destination for adventurers and thrill seekers. On July 15, 2006, 4 friends, eager to explore the depths, came together on this humid summer night for a daring adventure that would end up being a nightmare. Their plan seemed straightforward. They would snorkel and free dive into the smaller caves strewn throughout the river. They came prepared, or so they believed, with a single torch and basic snorkeling equipment. Far from the specialized gear needed for cave diving, it was a haphazard setup. A lack of expertise that would soon become painfully obvious was concealed by their youthful confidence. The hour struck 3 in the morning, while the party alternately dove into an unexplored cave in the river. Every dive was short, and the party used the torch to find their way. Jason Boyette, 22, who was the last to take his turn, was known to his friends for his spirit of adventure. He slipped into the water, the torch beam cutting through the darkness as he descended steadily, using the torch to light his way ahead as he swam deeper into the unknown. The entrance widened briefly before narrowing into a suffocating passage that was only 10 to 12 feet long and barely 2 feet in diameter. In order to advance, Jason had to navigate through one of 3 smaller holes within the tunnel. His friends waited on the surface, following the trajectory of his torch and looking into the water. At first, they assumed that Jason might be taking his time or going farther than the others had ventured. But as the minutes went by and the light grew faintly uneasy, one of Jason's friends, Tyler, made the decision to dive down and look for him. Armed only with a mask and a desperate will, Tyler dove into the water and followed the dim beam of light. Every time he swam, the cave walls seemed to close in on him. He saw that the flashlight, which had previously shown no signs of panic, was flickering erratically and was now moving back and forth, indicating a struggle. Tyler's heart was racing as he pushed forward, the weight of the water and the pressure of the cave pressing down on him. As he approached the source of the light, he could see Jason. Since Jason was wedged tightly but facing Tyler's direction, it was clear that his body became trapped in the narrow crevice, his arms flailing as he attempted to escape the hole that had trapped him. However, it was clear that Jason had gone too far, and as he turned around and left, the narrow, intimidating hole closed in on him. For a brief moment, Jason's eyes met Tyler's, a look of panic and desperation, a silent cry for assistance. Tyler hesitated, knowing that pushing forward could trap him himself, but the passage was too narrow to traverse without equipment, and the sharp edges of the cave's opening threatened to trap him as well. The lack of proper equipment they brought with them made any attempt at rescue nearly impossible. Tyler felt the crushing weight of his own limitations as the air in his lungs started to burn, forcing him to break the surface. His mind racing, he gasped for air and yelled to the others, his voice shaking as he described what he had seen. "He is stuck. He is trapped down there," he blurted out. "I saw him." They jumped repeatedly, one after the other, in an attempt to find a way to get to Jason. But each time they failed because the tunnel was too narrow and the situation was too dangerous. The torch beam, which had been frantic with movement, grew dimmer every time they looked, and by 3:30 a.m., it had completely vanished. As they presented the situation to the authorities, their voices broke and their desperation gave way to grim acceptance. At the scene, which was tense and solemn, rescue divers from the local sheriff's office were sent out right away. They would have to wait until the first light after evaluating the cave and concluding that it was too risky to start a recovery attempt in the dark. As dawn came over the river, the rescue effort got underway. The divers, who had years of training and specialized equipment, went down into the depths and maneuvered carefully through the cave's tight spaces, which required composure and accuracy. 9 a.m. The divers carefully extricated Jason, widening the crevice enough to get him out. Jason's death sent shockwaves through his circle of friends and the local community. The friends replayed the night in their minds, wondering if there was anything they could have done differently. Tyler, in particular, struggled with the memory of those final moments. They discovered Jason's body wedged in one of the smaller holes within the tunnel. His lifeless form was the result of the risk they took of exploring without proper preparation. The following story describes a terrible scenario in which no one got stuck, lost, or drowned, but even so, the harshness of the caves overcame them. The finding of the hidden cave was an unexpected result of dynamite explosions at the Valley Stone Quarry near Staunton, Virginia, on July 26, 1967. To the workers, it appeared to be a doorway to an uncharted realm. A black gaping hole where no one had gone for 3 days, the recently uncovered corridor was unaltered. 4 quarry employees, Charles Vaught, 28, John Miller, 18, Johnny Branner, 24, and David Price, 21, decided to explore it on the evening of July 29th. They were unprepared for caving, having only a rope and flashlights, but their curiosity and excitement overcame caution. For them, it was an adventure and a respite from the daily grind of quarry life. Although it felt stagnant, the air was tolerable as they entered the cave. Due to the hard walls from the blast, the initial steps were hesitant. As they went farther, the outside world dimmed with each step, and their once lively, laughing voices became quieter as the atmosphere grew heavier. The change was evident at 70 feet. The air became unbearably still, clinging to their skin like a damp veil, and their chests began to rise and fall more quickly. However, it was not immediately apparent how the air and their growing uneasiness were related. The passage narrowed, the ceiling pressed closer, the walls leaning, and each step seemed to draw more effort than the last. Then the group experienced the first wave of nausea, a nagging illness that made them feel sick to their stomachs and made them uneasy. As the group's movement slowed, David was the first to pause, placing a hand against the wall to steady himself. It wasn't exhaustion or fear that stopped him, but rather something more primal, an instinctual alarm triggered by the invisible danger surrounding them. Johnny noticed it next, his head spinning, and as he reached out to steady himself, the air carried a faint metallic tang that was subtle but persistent, like a warning they were too inexperienced to heed. The group's leader, Charles, stopped to look around the tight passageway. He dismissed his shaky movements and shallow breathing as anxiety, but when it suddenly hit him that their shallow breathing was coming from the air itself rather than from exertion, panic broke forth. As they turned to leave, the beams of their flashlights jiggled crazily across the walls. Following their instincts for survival, Johnny and David made rapid progress. Both John and Charles stumbled. As he stumbled towards the dim light of the cave's entrance, Charles' legs buckled, and he tried to steady himself against the wall with his torch. John, who was still only a teenager, turned to help but was overcome by the same suffocating wave and fell to his knees, breathing in short, desperate gasps before collapsing as well. David and Johnny clung to what little strength they had left as they staggered toward the cave's entrance. Johnny focused on the dim light ahead, a frail beacon of hope, while David clung to his fading strength. Every step was motivated by the sheer will to survive, and they dared not turn around knowing that the only thing standing between them and the air they sorely needed was escape. At last, they exploded into the open air, collapsing close to the quarry entrance. Their lungs heaved as they took in the fresh, life-saving oxygen, and the look in their eyes conveyed a mixture of horror and disbelief that death had arrived for their companions in that cave, silent and invisible. As soon as they regained consciousness, they called the emergency services, and rescue operations got on right away. Melville Fitzgerald, a veteran of the search and rescue team, was among the first to arrive. Although Melville had witnessed numerous crises during his work, the tales of foul air made him uneasy. Toxic fumes from the quarry explosion, most likely carbon monoxide, were thought of being the cause despite the dangers. Melville entered the cave with just a rope and a torch. As he made his way deeper into the passage, the only sound to break the chilling silence of the cave was the crunch of his boots on the gravel floor. By the time he reached the room where Charles and John lay, his head was spinning and his chest was burning with each breath. Charles's chest was still rising faintly, a sign of life clinging to the edge. Melville dropped to his knees and reached for him, but his own strength was failing him. The air felt like a vice, and every second he had to retreat, his vision tunneling as he staggered back towards the entrance. Melville collapsed into his team's arms after emerging from the cave barely conscious. His report was grim. One man may still be alive, but the toxic air was too dangerous to allow further attempts without proper ventilation. Industrial fans were brought in to ventilate the cave, pushing out the poisonous gases that had lingered for days. It was evident by the time rescuers came back for Charles and John that neither had lived. The autopsies verified what everyone had suspected. Both men had died of carbon monoxide poisoning, their lungs having been deprived of oxygen in the quiet darkness. Charles had been alive when Melville discovered him, but he had soon been killed by the fumes. The quarry supervisor then disclosed that he had cautioned the men about the risks of going into the cave because he had a suspicion that the dynamite blast's toxic gases might remain trapped due to the cave's inadequate ventilation. However, his warnings had been disregarded or minimized. Although Johnny and David, the survivors, had managed to escape the cave, the guilt of abandoning their friends remained, like the poisonous air that had almost killed them, as the cave itself was soon sealed off, remaining a silent witness to the tragedy and a tomb to the lives it had claimed. This final story is just as terrifying as the first two because it depicts how going head-to-head with nature can turn into a nightmare. On August 19, 2007, a calm morning with the promise of adventure permeating the air. Matthew Lawn, a 20-years-old experienced freediver, woke up from his tent at the campsite near Dogwood Spring in Florida. His confidence had grown over the course of innumerable springtime excursions. Before pushing the limits of his abilities, Matthew had explored Dogwood Spring numerous times and had been practicing extreme snorkeling, a dangerous sport that involves holding his breath while diving deep without scuba gear. He prepared in silence so as not to wake his girlfriend, who was still sound asleep in their shared tent. Matthew loved free diving. With just a mask, a snorkel, a swimsuit, and a small headlamp attached to his mask, Matthew set out from the campsite and headed for the spring. Without saying a word, he decided that today was another day when he was prepared to push himself to the limit. Once he arrived at the spring, Matthew took a deep breath, the kind he had done countless times, and started to descend into the cave. He had done this dozens of times before, so he was accustomed to the dark underwater world. He used his headlamp to guide him as he swam deeper into the cave's passages, straight down below. However, extreme snorkeling always carried risks. With each kick of his fins, he descended farther, but the underwater environment is unpredictable, demands respect, and has the power to turn on even the most seasoned divers in an instant. As Matthew made his way through the cave's narrow passageways, his sense of adventure was quickly replaced by a growing awareness of the difficulties that lay ahead. At some point, something went horribly wrong. It could have been a miscalculation or an unexpected turn in the cave while he was on his way back, or it could have been a sharp blow to his head that left him dazed, disoriented, and out of breath. Back at the campground, the morning started out as a calm one. When Matthew's girlfriend woke up, she discovered the tent was empty, and his confidence gave way to a desperate struggle for survival as his air ran out and his sense of direction was lost. Initially, she didn't think much of it because Matthew frequently went for early dives, but as the minutes passed and the hours passed, her anxiety increased. She searched the area but was unable to locate him, and when she saw that his car was still parked close to the spring and that he was nowhere to be seen, panic struck. She called the police, and rescue crews quickly arrived at Dogwood Spring, assessed the situation, and found Matthew's car parked nearby. The rescue team entered the water with flashlights piercing the murky depths. The entrance to the spring was stunning, but beneath it was a labyrinth of narrow, dark caverns, and Matthew could be anywhere. The time it took to prepare their equipment felt like an eternity. The water divers who specialize in underwater rescues were called in. Minutes turned into an hour as the search went on, and the divers encountered jagged rocks and areas where visibility dropped to almost nothing, making navigation even more treacherous despite their extensive experience. They moved methodically and carefully, following paths where they thought Matthew might have ventured. They tried various methods to get any sound, but there was no response. Around 15 minutes past 8 that morning, at last, they discovered Matthew's body buried in a pile of fallen rocks a few feet from the cave's entrance. His headlamp was still fastened to his mask, and the gash on his head indicated that he had struck the rock at some point, which was probably what caused his confusion. The rescuers exchanged signals and carefully removed Matthew, handling his body with solemn precision. As soon as they brought Matthew's body to the surface, his girlfriend was overcome with shock because, only hours before, they had shared tender moments and laughter at the campsite, completely unaware that it would be their last time together. The weight of the tragedy hit her all at once, and she collapsed to the ground, gripping Matthew's lifeless body with tears streaming down her face as if her love alone could bring him back. Bringing him to the surface was an emotionally taxing task because they knew the outcome would shatter the hopes of those waiting above. Though it was not reckless bravado, even the most experienced divers are susceptible to the risks associated with such extreme activities. Matthew's death shocked his friends and family, who later revealed that he had dived at Dogwood Spring countless times before, frequently pushing himself to explore deeper and longer. Thank you for watching this far. Do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Feel free to leave a story suggestion in the comment section. See you in the next video.